The sound of horses' hooves hammering against the dirt road was all Violet Kincaid could hear as she pressed her back against the wall of the saloon, her chest heaving with each ragged breath she took, while the sheriff and his deputies searched the buildings on the other side of Main Street in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on this August day in 1879, and sweat trickled down her spine beneath the dusty calico dress she wore, the one she had been wearing for 3 days straight since she fled from her uncle's ranch after discovering what he had planned for her. She had maybe 6 hours before they found her, maybe less, and then they would take her back to marry Edmund Carlyle, a man twice her age who had paid her uncle handsomely for the privilege of making her his fourth wife. The previous 3 had all died under mysterious circumstances, and Violet had no intention of becoming the 4th casualty of his matrimonial pursuits. She slipped around the corner of the saloon, keeping low, her green eyes scanning the street for any sign of movement. The town was small, just a dusty collection of wooden buildings squatting in the harsh New Mexico territory, and there were precious few places to hide. She had already tried the general store, but the owner had recognized her from the wanted poster her uncle had distributed, offering a reward for her safe return. Safe. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. There was nothing safe about being dragged back to a marriage she had never agreed to a man whose eyes held the cold calculation of a snake sizing up its next meal. "Move along now," a deep voice said from behind her, startling her so badly she nearly cried out. A strong hand gripped her elbow, firm but not painful, and she found herself being steered quickly into the narrow alley between the saloon and the livery stable. "Keep your head down and do not say a word." Violet risked a glance at her unexpected ally and found herself looking at a man who embodied everything she had heard about cowboys in this wild territory. He was tall, probably 6 feet or more, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular frame that spoke of years spent working cattle and surviving in harsh conditions. His face was tanned and weathered, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of dark stubble, and his eyes were a startling shade of blue that seemed to see right through her. He wore dusty work clothes, a worn leather vest over a dark shirt, and a black hat pulled low over his brow. A gun belt hung at his hips, the holster tied down in the manner of someone who knew how to use the weapon it held. "Who are you?" she whispered as he pulled her deeper into the alley, positioning them behind a stack of old crates where they would be hidden from view. "Nathan Fletcher," he said, his voice low and urgent. "And you are the woman they are looking for. I saw the posters." Her heart sank. "Are you going to turn me in for the reward?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. "That depends. Did you kill anyone?" "No," she said quickly. "I just refuse to marry a man I do not love. A man I fear." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Edmund Carlyle? You know him?" "Everyone in the territory knows him," Nathan said grimly. "And everyone knows what happened to his wives. The law cannot prove anything, but that does not mean we are all blind." He glanced toward the mouth of the alley, where the sound of voices was growing louder. "How long do you have?" "They said they would come at sundown," Violet said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts to remain calm. "My uncle gave me until sundown to change my mind and come willingly. After that, he said he would bring me back by force." Nathan pulled out a pocket watch and checked the time. "That gives us about 6 hours." He looked at her again, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch, a flicker of determination mixed with something softer, something that looked almost like compassion. "6 hours is not much time, but maybe it is enough." "Enough for what?" Violet asked. "Enough to get you somewhere safe," Nathan said, "or enough to find another solution." He paused, seeming to consider something. "What would happen if you were already married when they came for you?" Violet stared at him. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that there might be a way out of this that does not involve you running for the rest of your life," Nathan said. "But it would require trust, and it would require you to make a decision quickly." Before Violet could respond, the sound of boots on the boardwalk made them both freeze. Sheriff Davis's voice rang out, loud and authoritative. "Anyone seen a young woman, about 20 years old, dark hair, green eyes? Her uncle is looking for her. There is a reward." Nathan pressed a finger to his lips, and Violet nodded, hardly daring to breathe. They waited in tense silence as the sheriff moved past the alley, his footsteps eventually fading into the distance. When Nathan finally relaxed slightly, Violet let out a shaky breath. "We cannot stay here," Nathan said. "Too exposed. Come on." He led her through a maze of back alleys and side streets, moving with the confident ease of someone who knew every inch of this town. Violet followed, her mind racing. She knew nothing about this man except his name and the fact that he had not immediately turned her in for the reward. That hardly seemed like a solid foundation for trust, and yet something in her gut told her that Nathan Fletcher was not a man who would hurt her. There was a steadiness about him, a quiet strength that made her feel safer than she had felt in days. They ended up at a small adobe house on the outskirts of town, half hidden by a stand of cottonwood trees. Nathan pushed open the door and ushered her inside, then closed and bolted it behind them. The interior was simple but clean, with a few pieces of rough furniture and a stone fireplace against one wall. It was clearly a bachelor's dwelling, functional and sparse, but there was a certain orderliness to it that spoke of a man who took care of his things. "This is your home?" Violet asked. "For now," Nathan said. He took off his hat and tossed it onto a wooden peg by the door, then ran a hand through his dark hair. "I move around a lot for work, but I have been staying here for the past few months. We will be safe here for a little while at least. They will check the obvious places first before they start searching individual homes." Violet sank down onto a wooden chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had kept her going for the past 3 days was starting to wear off, and she felt the weight of her situation pressing down on her like a physical thing. "I cannot believe this is happening," she said softly. "A month ago, I was living a normal life, helping my aunt with the housework and learning to manage a ranch. Then my aunt died, and my uncle's true nature came out. He told me he had promised me to Edmund Carlyle years ago, that it was all arranged. When I refused, he locked me in my room and said I had until the wedding day to accept my fate. I managed to escape 3 days ago, but I knew he would not let me go easily. He wants that money Edmund promised him too badly." Nathan pulled out another chair and sat down across from her. "How old are you, Violet?" 20, she said. "Old enough to make my own choices, but my uncle is my legal guardian since my parents died when I was 16. The law is on his side." "Not if you are married to someone else," Nathan pointed out. "Then your husband would be your legal guardian, not your uncle." Violet looked at him carefully. "You are serious about this, are you not? You are actually suggesting that I marry you?" "I am suggesting it as an option," Nathan said. "Look, I know it sounds crazy. We do not know each other. But you said yourself that you only have 6 hours before they come for you. You could run, but your uncle has money and resources. He will chase you across the territory if he has to, and eventually he will catch you. But if you are legally married to another man, he cannot force you to marry Carlyle. The law would not allow it." "But I would just be trading one unwanted marriage for another," Violet said quietly. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his blue eyes steady on hers. "Not unwanted on my part," he said. "And I promise you this, I would never hurt you, never force you to do anything you did not want to do. We could make it a marriage in name only if that is what you wanted. I have a ranch about 50 miles north of here, near the Pecos River. It is a good piece of land, and it is isolated enough that your uncle would have a hard time causing trouble. You would be safe there." "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Violet asked, searching his face for any sign of deception. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. 5 years ago, I was engaged to a woman named Sarah. She was beautiful and kind, and I loved her more than anything. But her father decided he could get a better deal with a wealthy rancher from Texas, a man with money and influence. Sarah tried to refuse, but her father was a hard man, and he did not give her a choice. She married the rancher, and 6 months later, I heard she had died. They said it was a riding accident, but I always wondered." He met Violet's eyes. "I could not save Sarah, but maybe I can save you. Maybe that counts for something." Violet felt tears prick at her eyes. The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep inside her, and she realized that this man understood her situation in a way few people could. He had lost someone he loved to the same kind of forced marriage she was facing, and he was offering her a way out, no strings attached. It was more than anyone else had done for her. "If I agree to this," she said slowly, "what would you expect from me?" "Nothing you are not willing to give," Nathan said firmly. "As I said, we can make it a marriage in name only. You would have your own room, your own space. I would ask only that you act the part of my wife in public, so your uncle cannot challenge the marriage. Beyond that, you would be free to live your life as you choose." Violet thought about this, weighing her options. She could refuse Nathan's offer and try to run, but he was right that her uncle would not give up easily. Edmund Carlyle had paid a fortune for her, and her uncle would move heaven and earth to deliver on his promise. She could spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, always afraid of being caught. Or she could accept Nathan's proposal, marry a man she did not know, and hope that he kept his word about not forcing her into anything. It was a gamble either way, but at least with Nathan, she would have legal protection. "How would we even arrange a marriage in 6 hours?" she asked. "Do we not need a license, a minister?" "There is a justice of the peace in town, old Judge Harmon," Nathan said. "He is a friend of mine, and he's not fond of Edmund Carlyle. If I explain the situation, I think he would agree to perform the ceremony quickly and quietly. As for a license, we can file the paperwork afterward. The important thing is to have witnesses and legal documentation that the marriage took place before sundown." Violet took a deep breath. This was insane. She had met this man less than an hour ago, and now she was considering marrying him. But what other choice did she have? The alternative was being dragged back to her uncle's ranch and forced to marry a man she feared, a man who might very well kill her just as he had killed his other wives. At least Nathan was offering her a choice, a chance at freedom and safety. "All right," she said finally. "I will do it. I will marry you." Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, an emotion she could not quite read, but he nodded and stood up. "We should go now while the sheriff is still searching the other side of town. Judge Harmon's house is not far from here." They slipped out of the house and made their way through the back streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where the search was still ongoing. Violet kept close to Nathan, taking comfort in his solid presence beside her. He moved with a quiet confidence, always alert, always watching for potential threats. She realized that she felt safer with him than she had felt in a long time, and that realization was both comforting and terrifying. Judge Harmon's house was a small, neat structure with a well-tended garden out front. Nathan knocked on the door, and after a moment, an elderly man with white hair and shrewd gray eyes opened it. He looked from Nathan to Violet, and his eyebrows rose. "Nathan Fletcher," he said in a gravelly voice, "this is unexpected. What brings you to my door on this fine afternoon?" "I need your help, Judge," Nathan said without preamble. "This is Violet Kincaid, and she is in trouble. Her uncle is trying to force her into a marriage with Edmund Carlyle, and we have less than 6 hours before he comes to take her. She has agreed to marry me instead, but we need you to perform the ceremony now, quickly and legally." Judge Harmon's expression grew serious. "Edmund Carlyle," he said, and there was disgust in his voice. "That man is a blight on this territory. Come in, both of you." They stepped inside, and the judge closed the door behind them. His home was filled with books and papers, the cluttered but organized space of a man who spent his life working with the law. He gestured for them to sit, but Nathan shook his head. "We do not have much time, Judge. Can you help us?" "I can and I will," Judge Harmon said firmly. "But I want to make sure this young lady understands what she is agreeing to. Miss Kincaid, do you enter into this marriage of your own free will?" Violet nodded. "I do. I would rather marry a stranger who promises me kindness than a monster who will hurt me." The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. I will need 2 witnesses. Let me fetch my housekeeper and my clerk." He disappeared into the back of the house, and Violet found herself alone with Nathan again. She looked at him, this man who was about to become her husband, and wondered what her life would be like from this moment forward. He must have sensed her anxiety because he reached out and gently took her hand. "It is going to be all right," he said quietly. "I know this is not how you imagined your wedding day, but I give you my word that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and happy." His hand was warm and calloused, the hand of a working man, and Violet found herself holding onto it like a lifeline. "I believe you," she said, and was surprised to realize that she meant it. Judge Harmon returned with a middle-aged woman who must have been his housekeeper, and a young man who looked to be in his early 20s, presumably the clerk. The judge positioned everyone in the center of the room, with Nathan and Violet facing him and the two witnesses standing to the side. "We will keep this simple and quick," Judge Harmon said. He pulled out a small book and opened it, then looked at Nathan and Violet. "Nathan Fletcher, do you take this woman, Violet Kincaid, to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Nathan said, his voice steady and clear. The judge turned to Violet. "Violet Kincaid, do you take this man, Nathan Fletcher, to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, as long as you both shall live?" Violet's heart was pounding, but she looked into Nathan's blue eyes and found the courage to speak. "I do. By the authority vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Harmon said. He closed the book with a snap. "Mr. Fletcher, you may kiss your bride." Violet had not thought about this part, and she felt her cheeks flush with heat. Nathan seemed to sense her discomfort because he leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But she did not pull away. Instead, she let him press a gentle kiss to her lips, brief and chaste, but somehow meaningful. When he pulled back, there was a warmth in his eyes that had not been there before. "Congratulations," Judge Harmon said with a slight smile. "I will prepare the marriage certificate immediately. You two should sign it, along with the witnesses, and then I suggest you make yourselves scarce for a while. If Violet's uncle comes looking for her, he will not be happy to learn she's already married." They spent the next several minutes completing the paperwork, with the judge carefully documenting every detail of the marriage. When it was done, he handed Nathan the official certificate, signed and sealed. "Keep this safe," he said. "It is your proof that the marriage is legal and binding. No one can challenge it." "Thank you, Judge," Nathan said, shaking the older man's hand. "I owe you a debt." "Just make sure you treat your wife well," Judge Harmon said, glancing at Violet with kind eyes. "And Miss Kincaid, if this man ever mistreats you, you come straight to me. I will see that justice is done." "I will," Violet said, touched by his concern, "but I do not think that will be necessary." They left the judge's house and made their way back through the quiet streets. The sun was lower in the sky now, and Violet realized with a start that she had been married for less than 15 minutes. It felt surreal, like something out of a dream or a dime novel. She kept sneaking glances at Nathan, trying to reconcile the fact that this stranger was now her husband. "We should get supplies and leave town before your uncle arrives," Nathan said as they walked. "My ranch is a hard ride, and we will need food and water for the journey." "What about my things?" Violet asked, then laughed bitterly. "Never mind. I do not have any things. Everything I owned is still at my uncle's ranch." "We will get you new things," Nathan said firmly. "Clothes, whatever you need. I'm not a rich man, but I have enough to provide for my wife." The word wife sent a strange thrill through Violet, and she realized that despite the bizarre circumstances, she did not regret her decision. There was something about Nathan that made her feel safe, something solid and dependable. She barely knew him, but she trusted him in a way she had never trusted Edmund Carlyle. They stopped at the general store, where Nathan quickly purchased supplies for the journey: dried beef, hardtack, coffee, and a canteen of fresh water. He also bought Violet a simple cotton dress, a pair of sturdy boots, and a warm shawl for the cool desert nights. The storekeeper gave them curious looks but did not ask any questions, for which Violet was grateful. As they were leaving the store, a commotion erupted at the far end of Main Street. Violet's heart seized as she recognized her uncle's voice, loud and angry, demanding to know if anyone had seen his niece. Nathan grabbed her arm and pulled her into the shadow of the building. "That is him," Violet whispered, her voice shaking. "That is my uncle." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Stay here. I will get the horses." He disappeared around the corner, moving quickly and silently. Violet pressed herself against the wall, watching as her uncle and a group of men, including Sheriff Davies, made their way down the street, checking each building. Her uncle was a tall, heavy-set man with a florid face and cruel eyes. Just looking at him made Violet's stomach turn. He had seemed kind enough when her parents were alive, but after they died and she came to live with him, his true nature had emerged. He saw her as nothing more than a commodity, something to be sold to the highest bidder. Nathan reappeared, leading 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding and a smaller chestnut mare. He helped Violet mount the mare, then swung up onto the bay with practiced ease. They set off at a steady trot, heading north out of town. Violet did not dare look back, afraid that if she did, she would see her uncle chasing after them. They rode in silence for the first hour, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Fort Sumner. The landscape around them was harsh and beautiful, all red rock and scrubby desert plants, with the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising in the distance. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Under different circumstances, Violet might have found it breathtaking. As it was, she could only think about how close she had come to losing her freedom forever. When Nathan finally slowed their pace, allowing the horses to walk, Violet found her voice. "How far is your ranch?" "About 50 miles, Nathan said. "We will not make it in one night, so we will need to camp along the way. There's a good spot, I know, near a creek about 10 miles from here. We can rest there for a few hours and then continue at first light." "Will my uncle follow us?" Violet asked. "Probably," Nathan said honestly. "But by the time he figures out what happened and which direction we went, we will have a significant lead. And once we reach my ranch, we will have the advantage. I know that land like the back of my hand, and I have friends nearby who will help us if needed." Violet nodded, trying to take comfort in his words. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and the gentle rocking motion of the horse was making her drowsy. She had not slept properly in days, and the adrenaline that had kept her going was finally wearing off. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, partly to keep herself awake and partly because she was genuinely curious about the place that would be her new home. Nathan's expression softened slightly. "It is not much, but it is mine. 160 acres along the Pecos River, with good grazing land and fresh water year-round. I run cattle mostly and a few horses. The house is small, just 3 rooms, but it is well built and sturdy. There's a garden plot that has not been used in a while, but it could be productive again with some work. It is a quiet life, isolated, but I like it that way. Or at least, I did. Maybe having someone to share it with will make it even better." There was something wistful in his voice, and Violet found herself wanting to know more about this man who had so suddenly become her husband. "Do you have any family?" she asked. "Not anymore," Nathan said. "My parents died when I was 18. And my older brother was killed in a range war a few years back. I have some distant cousins back east, but I have not seen them in years. What about you?" "My parents died 4 years ago in a wagon accident," Violet said quietly. "I went to live with my uncle and aunt, and for a while it was all right. My aunt was kind to me. But she died last month, and without her there to soften my uncle's nature, he showed his true colors. I think he might have always planned to sell me off to Edmund Carlyle, but my aunt would never have allowed it while she was alive." "I am sorry," Nathan said, and the sympathy in his voice was genuine. "You have been through a lot." "We both have," Violet said. She looked at him, this man who had saved her from a fate worse than death, and felt a surge of gratitude mixed with something else, something warmer and more complicated. "Thank you, Nathan, for everything. You did not have to help me, but you did, and I will never forget that." "You do not have to thank me," Nathan said. "I made a choice, just like you did. We will make this work, Violet. I promise you that." They continued riding as the sun set and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The temperature dropped quickly, as it always did in the desert, and Violet was grateful for the shawl Nathan had bought her. They reached the creek he had mentioned just as full darkness fell, and Nathan helped her dismount, his hands steady and respectful as he guided her down. He set about making camp with efficient practiced movements. He unsaddled the horses and let them drink from the creek, then tethered them where they could graze on the sparse grass. He gathered dry wood and built a small fire, then unpacked their supplies and set water to boil for coffee. Violet watched him work, impressed by his competence. This was clearly a man who was used to taking care of himself. "You should eat something," Nathan said, handing her a piece of hardtack and some dried beef. "It is not fancy, but it will give you strength for tomorrow's ride." Violet accepted the food gratefully and nibbled on it while Nathan made coffee. The bitter, hot liquid was exactly what she needed, warming her from the inside and helping to chase away the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. They sat by the fire in companionable silence, and Violet found herself relaxing for the first time in days. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. Of course, Nathan said. Back at your house you said that this marriage would not be unwanted on your part, Violet said carefully. What did you mean by that? Nathan was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. I meant that I am not doing this purely out of altruism, he admitted. Yes, I want to help you. And yes, Sarah's death influenced my decision. But I also have to confess that from the moment I saw you in that alley, I felt something. A connection maybe, or just a sense that you were someone worth knowing. I know that sounds strange, given that we had just met, but it is the truth. I am not expecting you to feel the same way, and I meant what I said about keeping this marriage platonic, if that is what you want. But I want you to know that I am not just doing this out of duty. There is a part of me that hopes, in time, we might become more than just two strangers bound by a legal document. Violet's heart was beating fast, was beating. She had not expected such honesty from him, and she found herself deeply moved by his words. I felt it too, she said quietly. That connection. It is part of why I agreed to marry you. I know it sounds ridiculous, but when you took my hand in that alley, I felt safer than I have felt in months. And when you kissed me at the wedding, even though it was just for show, I felt something. I do not know what it means, but I felt it. Nathan looked at her then, and the firelight reflected in his blue eyes. Maybe it means we have a chance, he said softly. A chance to build something real out of this strange situation we found ourselves in. Maybe, Violet agreed. She felt a warmth spreading through her chest, and it had nothing to do with the coffee or the fire. She was married to this man, and while the circumstances were unusual, she found herself increasingly glad that it was Nathan Fletcher she had married, and not Edmund Carlyle. They finished their meal, and Nathan spread out bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, respecting the boundaries they had agreed upon. Violet lay down, wrapping herself in the blanket he had provided, and stared up at the vast expanse of stars overhead. She was exhausted, but her mind was racing, replaying the events of the day. This morning, she had been a desperate fugitive with no hope and no future. Now she was a married woman with a chance at a new life. It was almost too much to process. Violet? Nathan's voice came from the other side of the fire. Yes? Sleep well. You're safe now. Those simple words broke something open inside her, and Violet felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She was safe. For the first time in weeks, she was truly safe. Thank you, she whispered. Good night, Nathan. Good night, Violet. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion claim her, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. Violet woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of birds singing in the cottonwood trees that lined the creek. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure of where she was or how she had gotten there. Then the memories came flooding back, the desperate flight from her uncle, the stranger who had helped her, the hasty wedding, the ride through the desert. She sat up and saw Nathan crouched by the fire, pouring coffee into tin cups. Morning, he said with a slight smile. How did you sleep? Better than I have in days, Violet admitted. She stood and stretched, feeling the soreness in her muscles from yesterday's long ride. What time is it? Just past dawn, Nathan said. He handed her a cup of coffee and a piece of hardtack. We should eat quickly and get moving. I want to put as many miles between us and Fort Sumner as possible. They broke camp efficiently, and within half an hour they were back on the horses and riding north. The morning was cool and pleasant, with a light breeze that kept the worst of the heat at bay. As they rode, Nathan pointed out landmarks and told her about the territory they were passing through. He spoke of the Pecos River and the settlements along its banks, of the cattle drives that passed through in the spring and fall, of the harsh beauty of the land and the people who had learned to survive in it. Violet listened with growing interest. She had spent most of her life on her uncle's ranch, but she had never really paid attention to the world beyond its boundaries. Now, as Nathan described his life and his work, she found herself intrigued. There was a passion in his voice when he talked about ranching, a love for the land that was infectious. Do you think you will like it? Nathan asked after a while. Life on the ranch, I mean. It is hard work, and it can be lonely. I think I will, Violet said honestly. I grew up on a ranch, so I'm not afraid of hard work. And as for lonely, well, I would rather be lonely on your ranch than trapped in a marriage with Edmund Carlyle. Nathan's expression darkened at the mention of Carlyle's name. "Tell me about him," he said. "I know his reputation, but I want to hear your side of the story." Violet hesitated, then decided that Nathan deserved to know the truth. "My uncle introduced us about 2 months ago at a social gathering in Fort Sumner. Edmund was charming at first, very polite and attentive, but there was something about him that made my skin crawl, something cold and calculating in his eyes. I tried to tell my uncle that I was not interested, but he brushed off my concerns. A few weeks later, he told me that he had arranged for me to marry Edmund, that it was all settled. When I refused, he became angry. He said I was ungrateful, that I owed him for taking me in after my parents died. He locked me in my room and told me the wedding would take place whether I agreed or not." "How did you escape?" Nathan asked. "One of the ranch hands, a young man named Miguel, felt sorry for me," Violet said. "He unlocked my door late at night and gave me a horse. He told me to ride hard and fast and not to look back. I rode for Fort Sumner because I thought I could catch a stagecoach to Santa Fe, maybe start a new life there. But by the time I arrived, my uncle had already sent word ahead. There were posters offering a reward for my return, and everyone was looking for me. I spent 3 days hiding in alleys and abandoned buildings, trying to figure out what to do. Then you found me." "Miguel is a brave man," Nathan said. "Not many people would risk their jobs to help someone escape." "I hope my uncle does not punish him for it," Violet said, worry creeping into her voice. "Miguel has a family to support." "If your uncle is smart, he will not," Nathan said. "Drawing attention to how you were being held prisoner would not reflect well on him. He will probably claim you ran away of your own accord and leave it at that." They rode through the morning and into the afternoon, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and take a drink from their canteens. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled north, becoming slightly greener and more lush as they approached the Pecos River Valley. Nathan pointed out his property line as they crossed it, and Violet felt a flutter of anticipation in her chest. This was her new home, the place where she would start her new life. The ranch house came into view in the late afternoon, a sturdy adobe structure with a red tile roof and a covered porch. It was small, as Nathan had said, but it looked well-maintained and welcoming. There was a barn nearby, along with a corral and several outbuildings. A windmill turned lazily in the breeze, pumping water into a stock tank. It was not grand or impressive, but it was honest and real, and Violet found herself liking it immediately. Nathan helped her down from her horse, and for a moment they stood close together, his hands on her waist. Violet looked up at him and saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. There was warmth there, and a kind of quiet intensity that spoke of deeper feelings. Then the moment passed, and Nathan stepped back, releasing her. "Welcome home," he said softly. Violet smiled. "Thank you. It is lovely." They unsaddled the horses and turned them into the corral, where they immediately went to the water tank to drink. Nathan showed Violet around the property, pointing out the garden plot that could be revived, the chicken coop that currently stood empty, the small barn where he kept his tack and tools. Everything was neat and orderly, a reflection of the man himself. Inside the house, Violet found 3 rooms, just as Nathan had described. A main room that served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room, a bedroom, and a small storage room that could potentially be converted into another bedroom. The furniture was simple but functional, and there were signs of a bachelor's life everywhere. A pile of mending that needed to be done, dishes stacked in the dry sink, a few books scattered on a table. "I know it is not much," Nathan said, sounding almost apologetic, "but it is clean and solid, and it will keep you safe." "It is perfect," Violet said, and she meant it. This house was hers now, or at least partly hers, and that was more than she had dared to hope for just yesterday. "Which room is mine?" Nathan gestured to the bedroom. "You take that one. I will sleep out here on the couch for now. It is not the most comfortable, but I have done it before." Violet felt a pang of guilt. "Nathan, I cannot take your bed. This is your house." "It is our house now," Nathan corrected gently, "and I insist. You need proper rest after everything you have been through. Besides, the couch is not that bad." Violet wanted to argue, but she was too tired to put up much of a fight. She peeked into the bedroom and found a large bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. It was sparse but clean, and the bed looked incredibly inviting after 2 nights of sleeping on the hard ground. "Thank you," she said to Nathan, "for everything. I know I keep saying that, but I mean it." "You do not have to keep thanking me," Nathan said with a slight smile. "We are married now. Taking care of each other is part of the deal." That evening, they worked together to prepare a simple meal of beans and cornbread. Violet found herself enjoying the domestic routine, the easy rhythm of working alongside Nathan. He was considerate and helpful, never getting in her way, always asking if she needed anything. It was such a stark contrast to the way her uncle had treated her, ordering her around and expecting her to serve him without question. After dinner, they sat on the porch and watched the sunset over the distant mountains. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the air was filled with the sound of crickets and the occasional call of a night bird. It was peaceful in a way Violet had almost forgotten existed. "I could get used to this," she said softly. "I hope you do," Nathan replied. He was sitting close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, but not so close as to make her uncomfortable. "I know this is not the life you would have chosen for yourself, but I want you to be happy here, Violet. I want this to feel like home." "It already does," Violet said, surprised by how true the words were. She had only been here a few hours, but there was something about this place, and about Nathan, that made her feel like she belonged. Maybe it was the security of knowing she was safe from her uncle and Edmund Carlyle. Maybe it was the kindness Nathan had shown her. Or maybe it was that strange connection she had felt from the first moment they met, the sense that fate had brought them together for a reason. They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Eventually, Nathan stood and stretched. "I should check on the horses before bed," he said. "You go on inside and get some rest. You have had a long couple of days." Violet nodded and rose from her chair. On impulse, she reached out and touched Nathan's arm. "Good night," she said. "And thank you." Again. Nathan covered her hand with his own, and the touch sent a warm shiver through her. "Good night, Violet. Sleep well." She went inside and prepared for bed, washing her face and changing into the nightgown Nathan had thoughtfully purchased for her in Fort Sumner. The bed was as comfortable as it had looked, and she sank into it with a sigh of relief. As she lay there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of Nathan moving around outside, she found herself thinking about the strange turn her life had taken. 24 hours ago, she had been terrified and alone, with no hope and no future. Now she was married to a man she barely knew, living in a house on a remote ranch in the New Mexico territory. It should have been frightening, but instead, she felt a sense of peace she had not experienced in a long time. She fell asleep thinking about Nathan's blue eyes and the gentle way he had kissed her at their wedding. The next few days fell into a comfortable routine. Violet rose early each morning and helped Nathan with the chores, feeding the horses, gathering eggs from the chickens Nathan purchased in a nearby town, tending the garden she had started to revive. The work was hard, but it was satisfying in a way she had not expected. She liked seeing the tangible results of her labor, the neat rows of vegetables beginning to sprout, the clean, well-maintained barn, the meals she prepared from scratch. Nathan was a patient teacher, showing her how to do tasks she had never learned at her uncle's ranch. He taught her how to mend tack, how to check the cattle for signs of illness, how to read the weather by watching the clouds. He never spoke down to her or made her feel stupid for not knowing something, and Violet found herself eager to learn. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk. Violet learned more about Nathan's life, about the years he had spent working on various ranches before saving enough money to buy his own land. He told her about his childhood, growing up with parents who had loved each other deeply and taught him to value honesty and hard work. He spoke of his brother, who had been his best friend, and of the grief he still carried over his loss. In turn, Violet told Nathan about her own life, about her parents in the happy years before their death, about her uncle's gradual descent into cruelty after her aunt passed away. She found it easy to talk to Nathan, to share things she had never shared with anyone else. He listened without judgment, offering comfort when she needed it and perspective when she asked for it. As the days turned into weeks, Violet felt herself beginning to heal from the trauma of her ordeal. The constant fear that had plagued her in Fort Sumner gradually faded, replaced by a growing sense of security and belonging. She was safe here, she was cared for, and she was free to live her life as she chose. and gradually, almost imperceptibly, her feelings for Nathan began to change. The gratitude and respect she felt for him evolved into something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster when he smiled at her, something that made her long for his company when they were apart. She found herself noticing little things about him, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, the strength in his hands as he worked, the gentleness in his voice when he spoke to the animals. She watched him interacting with the neighboring ranchers who occasionally stopped by, and she saw the respect they had for him, the way they valued his opinion and sought his advice. Nathan Fletcher was a good man, she realized, not just kind, but genuinely good, with a moral compass that never wavered and a generosity of spirit that extended to everyone he met. And more than that, he made her feel valued in a way she had never felt before. He listened to her opinions, asked for her input on ranch decisions, and treated her as an equal partner rather than as property or a burden. It was intoxicating, and Violet found herself falling in love with her unexpected husband. She did not tell him, of course. They had agreed to keep the marriage platonic, and she did not want to pressure him into something he might not want. But the feelings were there, growing stronger each day, and she could not help but wonder if Nathan felt the same way. One evening, about a month after their wedding, they were sitting on the porch as usual when Nathan cleared his throat. "Violet," he said, his voice unusually hesitant, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," Violet said, setting down the mending she had been working on. "How are you feeling?" Nathan asked. "About everything, I mean. About the marriage, about living here. Are you happy?" Violet considered the question carefully. "I am," she said honestly. "Happier than I have been in a long time, actually. This place feels like home, and you have been wonderful to me." "Why do you ask?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, there was a vulnerability in his voice that Violet had not heard before. "Because I need to be honest with you about something. When I offered to marry you, I told you it would be a marriage in name only, that I would not expect anything from you. And I meant that. I truly did. But over the past few weeks, my feelings have changed. I find myself thinking about you constantly, looking forward to the moments we spend together, feeling something I have not felt since Sarah. I'm falling in love with you, Violet, and I needed you to know that. I'm not asking you to feel the same way, and I will absolutely respect the boundaries we set, but I could not keep this to myself anymore." Violet's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Nathan could hear it. She looked at him, at this man who had saved her life and given her a home, and felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly took her breath away. "Nathan," she said softly, "I feel the same way." He turned to her, his blue eyes wide with surprise and hope. "You do?" "I do," Violet confirmed. She reached out and took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "I've been falling in love with you for weeks now. You're kind and patient and good, and you make me feel safe and valued. I did not want to say anything because I thought you might not want that kind of relationship, but if you were telling me that you do, then yes, Nathan, I love you." The smile that spread across Nathan's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. He squeezed her hand gently, then raised it to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "Violet," he breathed, "you have no idea how happy you have just made me." "I think I have some idea," Violet said with a smile of her own, "because I feel exactly the same way." Nathan stood and pulled her to her feet, and then his arms were around her, holding her close. Violet wrapped her arms around his waist and rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This was where she belonged, she realized, not just on this ranch, but in this man's arms. Fate had brought them together in the strangest possible way, but she would not change a single moment of it. "Can I kiss you?" Nathan asked, his voice low and intimate. "A real kiss this time? Not just for show?" "Please," Violet whispered. Nathan cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, and it was nothing like the brief, chaste kiss they had shared at their wedding. This kiss was deep and passionate, full of weeks of pent-up longing and newly declared love. Violet melted into it, her hands fisting in Nathan's shirt, her heart soaring. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for so long," Nathan said, resting his forehead against hers. "So have I," Violet admitted. She smiled up at him, feeling giddy and lightheaded with happiness. "What happens now?" Now, Nathan said, we start building a real marriage, not just a legal arrangement, but a true partnership based on love and respect, if that is what you want. That is exactly what I want, Violet said firmly. I want to be your wife in every sense of the word, Nathan. I want to build a life with you, raise a family with you if God wills it. I want to grow old with you on this ranch, watching the seasons change and the years pass. I want everything. Nathan kissed her again, more gently this time, and Violet felt tears of joy sliding down her cheeks. She had thought her life was over, that she would spend the rest of her days running and hiding. Instead, she had found something she never expected: true love, a real home, and a future full of hope and possibility. That night, they moved Violet's things from the bedroom to the storage room, transforming it into her own space, before Nathan shyly suggested that perhaps they could share the main bedroom. Violet agreed, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. They took things slowly, respecting each other's boundaries, but there was a new intimacy between them now, a sense of rightness that made everything feel natural and easy. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Violet's life. She and Nathan settled into their new roles as true husband and wife, building a life together that was based on mutual love and respect. They worked side by side during the day, managing the ranch and caring for the animals. In the evenings, they would sit together and talk, or read, or simply enjoy each other's company in comfortable silence. About 2 months after their wedding, Violet received word that her uncle had given up the search for her. A neighboring rancher, who had been in Fort Sumner, reported that her uncle had publicly disowned her, claiming she had brought shame on the family by running away from her betrothed. Edmund Carlyle, apparently, had moved on to pursue another young woman, and her uncle was too embarrassed by the whole situation to continue making a fuss. "It is over," Violet said, relief flooding through her as Nathan held her close. "I am truly free." "You always were," Nathan said, kissing her forehead. "But I'm glad he has officially given up. Now we can live our lives without looking over our shoulders." As autumn arrived and the leaves on the cottonwood trees turned gold, Violet discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening as they sat by the fire, and the joy on his face was something she would treasure forever. "A baby," he said, his voice filled with wonder. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Violet confirmed, her own happiness mirrored in his eyes. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Nathan said. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "I love you so much, Violet. Thank you for giving me this gift, for giving me everything." "I love you too," Violet whispered, "more than I ever thought possible." The months of Violet's pregnancy were filled with preparation and anticipation. Nathan built a cradle from cottonwood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Violet sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small they were. They talked endlessly about names and the future, about the kind of parents they wanted to be and the values they wanted to instill in their child. In early spring of 1880, Violet gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, with only a midwife from a neighboring ranch to help. But when Nathan finally got to hold his son, tears streaming down his face, Violet knew that every moment of pain had been worth it. They named him Thomas, after Nathan's father, and he was perfect in every way. He had Nathan's blue eyes and Violet's dark hair, and from the moment he entered the world, he wrapped both his parents completely around his tiny fingers. As Violet lay in bed recovering, with Nathan sitting beside her and baby Thomas cradled in his arms, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she had been desperate and afraid, running from a forced marriage with hours before her uncle came to take her away. Then Nathan had appeared, a cowboy with kind eyes and a generous heart, and somehow he had made those few hours feel like enough time to change everything. He had saved her life, yes, but he had done more than that. He had given her a home, a family, and a love that she had never dared to dream of. In those critical hours before her uncle came for her, Nathan had offered her a choice, and that choice had led to this: a husband she adored, a son she already loved more than life itself, and a future that stretched out bright and full of promise. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked softly, noticing the tears in her eyes. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," Violet said. about how 6 hours changed my entire life. If I had not met you that day in Fort Sumner, if you had not offered to help me, I do not know where I would be right now, probably dead or wishing I was. Nathan's expression grew serious. I think about that too sometimes, he admitted, about how close we came to never meeting at all, but we did meet, and you trusted me. And now we have this. He looked down at Thomas, who was sleeping peacefully in his arms. We have everything. We do, Violet agreed. She reached out and took Nathan's free hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you for making those hours enough time. Thank you for giving me a reason to hope. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger, Nathan replied. Thank you for marrying me, for loving me, for giving me a family. You have made me happier than I ever thought I could be, Violet. They sat together in the quiet of the bedroom, watching their son sleep and feeling the weight of their love and gratitude for each other. Outside, the spring wind whispered through the cottonwoods, and the Pecos River flowed steadily past the ranch, just as it had for centuries. Life went on, seasons changed, but here in this small adobe house, a family had been born from the ashes of fear and desperation, forged in the space of a few desperate hours and strengthened by the steady, patient work of building a life together. The years that followed were good ones. Thomas grew into a strong, healthy boy with his father's sense of responsibility and his mother's quick mind. 2 years after his birth, Violet gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, in honor of the woman Nathan had loved and lost. Sarah had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn determination, and she kept both her parents on their toes from the moment she learned to walk. The ranch prospered under Nathan and Violet's joint stewardship. They expanded their herd, added more land, and built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. They became pillars of their small community, known for their generosity and their willingness to help neighbors in need. Nathan served on the local Cattlemen's Association, and Violet started a small school for the children of the scattered ranches in the area, teaching them to read and write and figure sums. Through it all, their love for each other only grew stronger. They had their disagreements, of course, as all couples do, but they always worked through them with patience and respect. Nathan never forgot the promise he had made to treat Violet as an equal partner, and Violet never took for granted the gift Nathan had given her that day in Fort Sumner. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch of their home and remember that desperate day when their lives had collided. They would talk about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together, about the 6 hours that had changed everything, about the leap of faith they had both taken in marrying a stranger. "Do you ever regret it?" Violet asked one such evening, when they were well into their 30s and their children were playing in the yard. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking on that responsibility on such short notice." Nathan looked at her with such love and certainty that it made her heart skip a beat, even after all these years. "Never," he said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Violet. You and our children. That day in Fort Sumner, when I saw you hiding in that alley, something inside me recognized you. I knew somehow that you were going to change my life. I just did not know how much or how wonderfully." Violet smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "I felt it too," she said. "That connection. I was so scared, but when you took my hand, I felt safe for the first time in weeks. I think maybe we were meant to find each other, Nathan. Maybe fate brought us together." "Maybe it did," Nathan agreed. He wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. "And I'm grateful for it every single day." They watched the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors while their children's laughter rang out across the yard. Thomas was teaching Sarah how to rope a fence post, and she was getting frustrated with the process, her little face scrunched up in concentration. Nathan chuckled and called out some advice, and Sarah tried again, this time managing to loop the rope around the post. Her triumphant shout made both parents smile. "We did good," Violet said softly. "With them, with this life. We did really good." "We did," Nathan agreed, "and we are going to keep doing good for as long as we have." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Violet thought about the woman she had been on that desperate day in August 1879, terrified and alone with only hours before her uncle came to take her away. She thought about the cowboy who had saved her, who had made those hours feel like enough time to build a foundation for an entire lifetime. and she thought about the life they had built together, brick by brick and day by day, turning a hasty marriage of convenience into a love story for the ages. She had been so afraid that day, so certain that her life was over. But Nathan had shown her that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another, better one. He had taken her hand and led her into a future she never could have imagined, and she had followed him with trust and hope and eventually with love. Now, more than a decade later, with their children playing in the yard and their ranch thriving around them, Violet understood that those 6 desperate hours had indeed been enough time to make a decision that would change everything, enough time to place her trust in a stranger who would become the love of her life, enough time to set in motion a chain of events that would lead to this moment, this life, this profound and perfect happiness. Nathan must have sensed the direction of her thoughts, because he kissed the top of her head and murmured, "I love you, Mrs. Fletcher." "I love you too, Mr. Fletcher," Violet replied, her heart full to overflowing. Forever and always. And as the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, they sat together in the comfortable silence of two people who had found their home in each other, grateful beyond measure for the strange and wonderful twist of fate that had brought them together when it mattered most. The hours had been few, but the love that grew from them was infinite, stretching out across the years like the vast New Mexico sky, constant and true and enduring. Their story had begun with fear and desperation, with a woman running from a terrible fate and a cowboy willing to risk everything to help her. But it had transformed into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and the unexpected places where love can bloom. In the end, those 6 hours had not just been enough time to save Violet from a forced marriage. They had been enough time to save both of them, to give them each what they needed most, to create a family and a future that neither had dared to hope for. As they finally rose from the porch and called their children inside for the night, Nathan took Violet's hand one more time, just as he had in that alley in Fort Sumner all those years ago. And once again, Violet felt that sense of safety and rightness, the certainty that wherever Nathan Fletcher led, she would follow, because he had proven time and again that he would never lead her astray. They walked into their home together, surrounded by the life they had built and the love they shared, knowing that their story, which had begun in desperation and fear, had found its perfect, happy ending in the simple, profound joy of being together. The cowboy and the woman he saved had become husband and wife, then partners and parents, and finally 2 souls so intertwined that neither could imagine existing without the other. And every night, as they lay down to sleep, Violet whispered a prayer of gratitude for the stranger who had become her everything, for the man who had taken 6 desperate hours and transformed them into a lifetime of love. Nathan would pull her close and hold her through the night, just as he had promised to do all those years ago. And in the quiet darkness, they would both know that they had found something rare and precious, a love that had been forged in crisis and tempered by time into something unbreakable. Their children grew and eventually had children of their own, and the ranch passed down through the generations, each new family adding their own chapter to the story. But the tale of how it all began, of the desperate woman and the cowboy who saved her, remained a favorite family legend, told and retold around fires and dinner tables for decades to come. And always, at the heart of the story, was this simple truth, that sometimes, when everything seems lost and time is running out, fate intervenes in the form of a stranger with kind eyes and a generous heart. And sometimes, if you are brave enough to take that stranger's hand, 6 hours really is enough time to change your life forever. Violet and Nathan lived long, happy lives together, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, never once regretting the hasty decision they had made in Fort Sumner on that August day in 1879. They grew old together on their ranch by the Pecos River, their love deepening with each passing year until it became impossible to remember a time when they had not been together. When Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, with Violet holding his hand just as she had held it on their wedding day, his last words were of love and gratitude for the woman who had made his life complete. And when Violet followed him 5 years later, surrounded by the large, loving family they had created together, her last thoughts were of a desperate day in Fort Sumner, when a cowboy with blue eyes had taken her hand and promised to keep her safe. He had kept that promise for more than 40 years, giving her a life beyond her wildest dreams and a love that sustained her through every challenge and joy. The hours they had been given before her old life ended had indeed been enough time, because what they built in those hours was a foundation strong enough to last not just a lifetime, but generations. Their love story became part of the fabric of their family, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of courage and kindness, and that true love can bloom in even the most unlikely circumstances. And so, their story ended, as all the best love stories do. Not with an ending at all, but with a legacy that lived on in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched, a testament to the power of love to transform fear into hope, strangers into soulmates, and a few desperate hours into a lifetime of happiness.